Hi students, welcome to week 8, and I know most of you are probably pretty excited about spring break next week and getting a little bit of a break in the semester, and I can't believe we're already at that point. I wanted to quickly just go over the assignment this week for the quadrant worksheet. So I just want to explain because there's two parts to it. So what I'm going to do is show you what the assignment looks like if you haven't been to it already. And the first part of the assignment really has to do with this website, Time in Different Cultures. So again, we're looking at this chapter 4 in the text really dives into how we manage ourselves in relation to time. So for many students, one of the big things that they want to work on for success skills is their time management. And I always laugh because we can't change time, right? We can't stop the clock. We can't change the hours. All we can do is change ourselves, our actions, our behaviors in relation to time. Some of us deem ourselves as procrastinators, and it's a habit we picked up at some point along the way, and for some reason it's hard to overcome that. Procrastinators sometimes tend to find themselves really struggling with deadlines in college and being successful. Other students, they don't find themselves procrastinating on schoolwork, maybe in other aspects of their life, but on schoolwork they manage their deadlines and their timelines pretty well. And so a lot of times, how can we learn from each other in how to be successful? Because sometimes I'm an over-organizer, and so sometimes I adhere to a timeline so strictly, and then other times, like for example, my spouse is completely on the opposite side of the spectrum and doesn't adhere to deadlines and time, and that's how he operates his day. So how can we learn from each other to find a balance? And yet in our schoolwork, it's probably pretty important to make sure we are following deadlines and we are managing ourselves in relation to time. So what I want to show you is the first part of this assignment is to go to this website. You're going to be looking in depth at the different explanations of time in different cultures. And so it really talks about our attitudes towards time orientation, and then different definitions of how cultures consider time. So go through just this first page. You don't have to go to other parts of the website, but it's really an interesting read on time, especially in different cultures. And is that influencing how you approach time? And then part 2 is you're going to look at this work quadrant, and this is similar to what's in the book. And you're going to, in the textbook in chapter 4, and you're going to look at your observable behaviors and start categorizing them into these different quadrants. So in the textbook, they talk about on page 104, how all your actions can be categorized into these different quadrants. Quadrant 1 is, let me go down again, quadrant 1 is actions that are urgent and important. So for example, if your test is on a Thursday and you're studying on a Wednesday night, that is an urgent, important action. You are studying at the very last minute, and your action is in quadrant 1. That behavior is a quadrant 1 behavior. If tax day is on April 15th and you're filing your taxes April 14th, that is a observable action that's last minute. So all your procrastinating activities that are right at the deadline will fall into quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 are important actions that are not urgent. So you're doing things with plenty of time ahead so that you're not rushed and panicked at the end. So for example, if you know that you have a paper due at the end of right after spring break and you're already working on it right now, that's working ahead of time so that you're not crunched at the last minute. So that's an action that can be put into quadrant 2. If you are creating an outline for your study schedule for your next big test, then again, that's an action that's in quadrant 2. If you are reading your text on time and ahead and keeping up with your timeline for a class, again, it's something that's important to do for your success, but it's not in an urgent manner, then again, that falls into quadrant 2. Quadrant 3 has to do with something that's not important, and yet we consider it to be urgent. So for example, I found myself doing that this weekend. I had a ton of things to catch up on. I had bills to pay, catch up on grading, and I found myself doing things that were not urgent and not important to do at the moment. So for example, I found myself writing a thank you card. That was something that could have been done later, while my other priorities could have been done first, like paying bills and catching up on the grading. And I found myself starting to start writing thank you cards. And I had to stop myself and say, wait a minute, the other things that I have to do are more important. And yet at that moment, I considered, oh, I need to get this thank you card done. And that wasn't the biggest priority on my list. So I had to stop myself in the middle of that action. This is the category where a lot of times we find ourselves saying yes to people that we don't necessarily need to do something, yet we consider it so important. Like, I really need to help a friend move this weekend, and yet we know that we have a test next Tuesday, and it's probably more important that we study for the test. And yet we've committed ourselves to helping a friend move all weekend. So it's a balance. Again, do we want to abandon our friends? No. We could say, hey, I can help you for half the day, but the other half of the day I really have to study for a test. So it's that finding that balance between I can manage some of my behaviors to do something that is important. I don't want to ignore this and abandon a friend, but I also have other priorities that are important for my success in my classwork. So again, it's finding that balance and how to manage ourselves and manage what we do in relation to the time that we have. And again, sometimes learning to create boundaries, especially with friends and family, and saying sometimes I have to say no, or sometimes I can't give everything or all my time, but where can we meet in the middle? And we can compromise. Quadrant 4 is basically time wasters. These are things that are not important and not urgent. We have a ton of things that can go in there. Watching YouTube video clips, playing video games, shopping for hours at the mall. You name it, we could spend hours and hours in the not important, not urgent time waster category. And sometimes it's good to do a little de-stress. Sometimes we need to spend some time in something that's not related and kind of de-stress from life. But it just, again, it's a balance. How much time are we spending? So what you're tasked to do is to look at the last, I said 4 days, but it could be, 5 or 6 days or the last week, and start categorizing where your activities have been. Have you been spending time in quadrant 1? Have you been spending a lot of time in quadrant 4 in time wasters? Quadrant 2, things that are important to do, but you're not doing it with an urgency, so you are staying on task. Quadrant 3, are you spending a lot of your time committing to things that you consider urgent, but maybe they're not as important as what you think? The goal is to spend as much time in quadrant 2. That's the goal. So again, take a look at your observable behaviors. If you have any questions on this assignment or any assignment for the semester, please let me know. I hope you have a great week and a great spring break. We are going to take a break from classes next week. And so once you turn in your assignments for this week by Monday, again, 12 noon, then you have the rest of the week to enjoy and not think about this class, at least for next week. So hopefully you finish your assignments ahead of time and you can spend the week taking a little bit of a break. All right, have a good week.